Welcome, Dave.
It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Nice to have you. Okay, to start off with, how did you get connected with the Indian teachings and yoga in general, or Swami Vivekananda?
The long story, the medium story is that I was raised Unitarian. My mother was Jewish, is Jewish. My father was Catholic. They couldn't find anybody to marry them, so they found a Unitarian minister who would, and they decided, we're going to raise him Unitarian. And Unitarian is a movement that endorses and celebrates the different religions of the world. I went through a long period of time as a teenager and a young adult of not being interested in any kind of religion. Became a personal development instructor for one of the educational organizations of Southern California, actually offices throughout California and Hawaii. And I was teaching secular teachings, personal development, personal growth. And an emphasis started happening within the organization. There was a movement to bring more spiritual matters into our teachings.
Okay.
And at first I questioned it.
Okay.
And eventually it was presented in a way that brought me back to the idea that religion could be something wonderful. It had not really been in my life because I had been pursuing a secular career. And the more I was introduced to the philosophy of oneness, I think the first inclination I had was with the Course of Miracles. One of the teachers in my organization was involved in that. And I liked a lot of the ways that it was portraying the world. And I think I remembered actually these things being taught to me as a child, that there is perhaps a unity under the diversity of all the different religions. And so I became more involved, and then the organization, which was the Summit organization, dissolved, and I decided I was going to write a book, a secular book on personal development that would have a chapter on spirituality. When I got to the portion on spirituality, I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and within 2 weeks I knew that I knew nothing about spirituality. I knew nothing. And I made a choice at that moment that I knew that there was validity there, so I was, since my background was teaching, I was going to become scholarly about it. Mm-hmm. The hint that I knew nothing was that I really didn't understand the difference between the word spirit and the word soul. And I said, I should know what that is if I'm going to write something about it. So I decided that I would find out what spirit and soul meant to all the different religions, not just to one religion, and to have enough information to make an educated statement of what the spiritual path might be. So I was living in Trabuco Canyon at the time, and I had passed by the Ramakrishna Center, the Ramakrishna Monastery, many times, but I thought it was a Krishna organization, the Hare Krishna.
Okay.
And I kept driving by. But I read a book by Houston Smith called The World's Religions, one of the greatest books ever written in comparative religion. If I may make this aside just for a moment, sure. The reason it's such a powerful book is because he celebrates each religion. Of course there's problems with each religion, but he focused on the spirit of each religion. And for the first time I was learning things about Judaism I had no idea. I had no idea the depth and the beauty of Judaism, even though my relatives were Jewish, and I spent, all my young life celebrating and being around Jews. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with Christianity. I had no idea of the depth of the spirit of Christianity, having hung around with my father's part of the family. They were both dysfunctional families, and therefore I didn't get the best of what they had to offer. So Houston Smith opened me up to these beautiful ideas that all these different religions are saying in different ways, mm-hmm. different varieties of really the same underlying message. And when I got to his essay on Hinduism, I was blown away by this wealth of wisdom and practice. And coming from a background of practical psychology, practical seminar, how to get from point A to point B, I was amazed at how the religion of the Hindus, which is really the Vedic religion, was so detailed on how to move from point A, which is where our normal state is of being conditioned to think of ourselves as I, me, and mine, to move from there to a more spiritual place. It had all been thought out. It had all been formulated in the most exquisite ways, unlike any system of thought I'd ever come across. I had studied and taught Maslow. I had studied and taught Erickson. I had studied and taught many different, Napoleon Hill and all the new agey American personal development systems, but nothing compared with the yoga systems and the Upanishadic Vedanta philosophies of India. So I ventured up to the monastery because he had told me about Ramakrishna in the book. He mentioned it, and a book fell out of the bookshelf, and it was by Vivekananda, and I was startled by the eloquence and the directness and the beauty and the simplicity of the teachings, and it was like I was caught and captured and put on the team. And so for the next years, I just did nothing but focus on Indian philosophy, determined to become the best I could be at presenting it in the most faithful way that I could, with Vivekananda as my teacher. And a couple of years after that, I met with one of the Swamis, Swami Sarvadevananda. Okay. And I'm sure you know that the teachings of the importance of having a teacher or a guru. These days there have been many disappointments with gurus, and so it's almost in vogue to
say you have a guru,
or actually to dismiss the guru process, because so many people have been hurt with gurus that kind of fell. I, on the other hand, had this experience of walking into a room at the library that you've been in the Ramakrishna temple, and there was Sarvadevananda, and there was an embodiment of these ideals, this beautiful, beautiful, sweet embodiment of love named Sarvadevananda, strong but loving, magnificent in so many ways.
And for the people out here in TV land, they don't really understand properly what the context of guru means. It comes from the Sanskrit root guru, meaning remover, and guru meaning obstacles, so remover of darkness or obstacles.
That's exactly right. And the problem in America has been that the remover of obstacles, many of them haven't removed their own obstacles. And therein lies the difference between many so-called teachers and the teachers of the Ramakrishna order, because this is the most venerable monastic order perhaps that the world has ever known. It's in the lineage of the Puri monastery, the Puri lineage of monks that dates back to the Buddha.
Okay. And just to give a background on the Vedas and Vedanta, can you just talk about when it originated in contrast to, say, Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha?
Sure. I love talking about this. So, India, as you know, is not so concerned about time and space. They're concerned about that which transcends time. And so in India, you will not find readily the names of the authors of the magnificent scriptures. We have names attached to it, but who knows? And we have dates attached to it, but the variation of the dates are extreme. Some people put the Vedas. The Vedas are the oldest Indo-European scriptures, actually, I think the oldest Indo-European writings that we have of India and Europe, the oldest in existence. And the Vedas, Veda means to know, vid, from vid. So they're the knowings. They are considered to be shruti, that which is revealed. They're not written by anybody. They were floating in the cosmos.
Kind of, and weren't they discovered or translated through the rishis of the Himalayas? Or depending on accounts, again, I don't want to...
Getting back to my approach from a scholarly approach.
Okay.
That's how I got into the heart. Okay. I had to go through the scholarly to have this grab me.
Okay.
So I decided with all the different scriptures to read them, their translations from the sages and the scholars with the greatest authority.
Okay.
On the academic side, Ramakrishna, who was one of the first presidents of India, who's considered to be the greatest spiritual historian.
Okay.
From the spiritual side, of course, Swami Vivekananda, Nikhilananda, Gandhi for the Bhagavad Gita, and things like that. So my understanding of the Vedas is that they were not composed, but revealed. People, many different people call it different ways. But the Vedas came to be in 4 different time periods of about 100 years each.
Okay.
The first portion of the Vedas were the hymns to the Samhitas, the hymns to the nature gods. Most societies, primitive societies, start their relationship with the unknown through the nature forces. Mm-hmm. The god of the storm, the god of the wind, the god of fire, the god of earth, the god of the sun. And the beginning hymns, the beginning portions of the Vedas are hymns to these gods.
Okay.
Then 100 or so years later came the Brahmanas, and these are now the priests stepping up and starting to say, as it happens very often in all different religions, you have to go through me to get there.
Okay.
And so the Brahmanas are about the priests codifying the different religious rites.
Okay.
Then came a couple hundred years later, came the forest treaties, the Aranyakas. These seem to be a rebellion against the priests, mm-hmm. with the people going off into the forest and creating a community for spiritual development. And these are the ancient rishis that came up with the jewel of the Vedas called the Upanishads.
Okay.
The Upanishads are called the flower. The flower.
Oh, no problem. Just keep going.
Oh, the Upanishads are the flower of the Vedas. Uh-huh. They are nothing like the original portions of the Vedas in that they posit for the first time in human history, for the first time, the oneness of everything. It is no longer a god for the sun, a god for the moon, a god for the rain, mm-hmm. a god for the storm. There is one ultimate transcendent principle.
And they would refer to this god as Atma or Brahman? Or
Brahman. Brahman is the transcendent reality, the one without second, okay. the one from which everything issues forth. Okay. The first proclamation the world has ever known that all is one and everything is a manifestation of that one, temporary manifestation.
It's a good thought.
When I stumbled across this, I had the same experience that millions of people before me had. The same experience, I will tell you, that Emerson and Thoreau had. They were one of the first people to read the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita mm-hmm. because they were only translated into English mm-hmm. within the last 300 years. So the Upanishads posit that all is one, and the highest reality is this one infinite principle. If you're devotional, you'll call it the Godhead. Okay. If you're agnostic, you might call it the cosmic consciousness. There's so many different ways to announce it. Okay. And what you mentioned, Atman. The Upanishads proclaim that Atman is the transcendent Brahman indwelling, immanent in the heart, in the lotus of the heart. Okay. And so the boldest statement of the Upanishads is Tat Tvam Asi. Thou art that. Mm-hmm. Thou art that. You are the one. In as much as anything else and anyone else, you are a manifestation of that one. And release and freedom and the infinite joy that is available comes in identifying with Brahman, identifying with the spirit within rather than the ego, mm-hmm. and therefore being freed of the ego's self-centered pursuits, and pursuits that can never truly make us happy. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. And that's what yoga is. Yoga has a two-pronged meaning. Yoga comes from the root yuj, which means to unite, union. So yoga is the union of the individual soul, or the Atman, with Brahman, with the supreme soul. And it is also the methods towards that union. Mm-hmm. So it has that dual meaning. It is that freedom, that moksha, that liberation. That is yoga, union, realization. Self-realization, as America has come to know it through the works of Yogananda. But it's also the effort and the pathways towards it. Mm-hmm. The Upanishads are the first writings that talk about yoga.
Okay, and roughly, what, about 4,000 BC, 3,000 BC?
No. The Vedas, the historians, the spiritualists would say that they may be 2000 BC, 3000 BC. I've even seen 5000 BC.
Okay.
But the academians, the
Academics?
the academics will say that they were around 1200, 1300
Okay.
BC.
How about the Bhagavad Gita? Since this is for yoga teachers as well, since much of what is being taught here is not what's being taught classically or what's been taught in India, and most of the mainstream America doesn't know this, so that's why we're here talking about this. So,
Yes.
Can you just talk about the Gita for a while?
Yes, I can, but I would just like to finish that the Upanishads came hundreds of years down the line. Remember, the original Vedas are the Samhitas, so around 400 years later. So it's considered that the Upanishadic period is from 1000 BC to around 300 BC. The earliest Upanishads are 1000 BC. Imagine, 1000 years before Christ, the proclamations that all is one, and that oneness is the truth of life, and that by identifying ourselves with that oneness, we come to the infinite joy. One of the great quotes of the Upanishads is, "There is no joy in the finite. There is only joy in the infinite." What does that mean? It means that any joy we have, whether it's with our loved one, whether it's with a beer, whether it's with a good movie, that joy is a fraction, it's a reflection, a fraction of the supreme joy that one feels when they are connected with their divinity. That's what all the sages and all the rishis say. And Vivekananda is brilliant in bringing these ideas in perfect, eloquent English.
Okay.
He was, I want to get to Vivekananda, but I will answer. Here's the lineage. The three major yoga shastras, or yoga sutras, are the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So we have the Upanishads somewhere between 1000 BC and 300 BC. We have the Bhagavad Gita somewhere around the 5th century. Can't be sure.
Okay. Can you give the audience just a clear overview of what that, with Krishna, Arjuna, what the essence was, just in a few sentences?
Yes. I don't think I can do it in a few sentences.
Well, I just had to put you on the spot there just to see if you could do it.
I don't think I can, but I'll give it a try.
Action in life and just...
Well, the Bhagavad Gita is the metaphor, the accepted metaphor. It's on the battlefield, and Arjuna does not want to fight his corrupt cousins who have taken over and have done great damage to the society. And the dialogue is between Krishna, who represents at one Brahman, and at two the higher self within, or the Atman within Arjuna.
Okay.
And Arjuna represents you and I. Okay, so it's the lower self and the higher self. The lower self is, I don't want to fight, I don't want to struggle. What makes sense of this for me? And Krishna, it's a dialogue, the Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. And the battlefield is for the first chapter, there's 18 chapters, and then it goes into the dissertation of the different yogas. The metaphor of the battlefield is that we have to fight in life. There's no getting around it. The only choice we have is what our fight is. And the metaphor here is the fight for the purity of the higher soul in our personality. And if we don't fight to purify our personality of the lower tendencies, we will be caught in that circle of birth and death.
Suffering, samsara.
Suffering forever. And eventually we will all come to see that throughout the different lifetimes and make our choice for the higher. And so Krishna is saying, Arjuna, choose the higher. Choose the higher. Come to me. Come to me. And the different chapters are the different forms of classical yoga.
Okay. Can you talk about some of the Yoga Sutras, when it was written, and of course how it gets adapted now with the different paths, with the Bhakti, Jnana, and Raja, and Karma?
The yogas, I was thinking about this coming over here today, and I had not thought of this, but I believe that the first English translation of the Yoga Sutras were Vivekananda's. He wrote it in 1896.
Okay.
And it was published throughout the world.
Okay.
Tolstoy, when Tolstoy's quote of bring me the book by Vivekananda, it's more than reading, it's a broadening of the soul. I believe he was referring to Vivekananda's Raja Yoga.
Oh, okay.
So Raja Yoga was written by Patanjali, somewhere, you know, the Indians, somewhere between 400 BC and 400 AD. So they've narrowed it down to 800 possible years. I think it's somewhere around, and most people say it's on BC. So it's around, I would say it's around 200 BC.
And that has those consist of 4 chapters, about 298 sutras?
I think it's 195 sutras. And there are 4 chapters. And
what would you say the gist of that is, just for the audience or some teachers out there?
Well, the gist of the Yoga Sutras, yoga has many different definitions. The ultimate, the classical definition is union with God. Mm-hmm. But remember, the other definition is the means to that. And one of the 4 classical yogas is Raja Yoga, which is based on the Yoga Sutras. Okay. It is union with God through mind mastery, the self-control, the mastery of the mind. Okay? The other 3 are Bhakti Yoga, which is union through devotion. Jnana, which is union through intellectual discrimination, through seeing the one everywhere.
Knowledge.
And karma is oneness through selfless service. It's all about losing yourself for something higher, diminishing the ego so that it does not have the power to sway you into trivial pursuits and things that will only fuel the fire. Every time a gratification of the ego is indulged in, the gratification urge gets stronger. We don't know that while we're in the midst of it. Oh, I'll just do it one more time, just one more time. Yeah. And it gets bigger and bigger. What yoga is about is renunciation. It's renouncing the lower for the higher. Okay? So the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali didn't create anything. He codified. He took the information from the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita that referred to mind mastery, the mastery of the mind and the senses, and he codified it into these 195 sutras so that people could memorize them and teachers could expand on them, and so that people who had remember, the reason there are 4 classical yogas is because there are 4 main temperaments in human beings. Some people are devotional. They will not go into a church unless there's love and praise and singing and worship. Well, then there's some that are intellectual, and they will never go into a church that has love and praise and devotion. So the intellect needs a different means than the devotional. Then there's the reflective, and that's Raja Yoga, the inward. I'm going to do it through the mind. And then there's Karma Yogi. The Karma Yogi wants to be in the world. He does not want to, he will not feel comfortable attaining to Raja Yoga. He's not reflective. He wants to go in there.
And can we give just some examples so the audience understands? Who would be a good example? Say, would Gandhi be a good example of Karma Yoga?
Gandhi was, what Vivekananda, we need to get to Vivekananda. I know we are, that's fine. I'm having a great time. What Vivekananda did with his teacher Ramakrishna was for the first time said, all you who find your one path know that in finding the one path, when you master it, you must not neglect the other paths. They're not your primary tendency, but struggle, effort for, that's what Krishna would say, make the effort, struggle, fight. So what Ramakrishna was the perfect yoga master. I mean, he was beyond a yoga master. He was an incarnation, as far as I'm concerned.
And when you say Ramakrishna, just so we don't have confusion in the audience between Hare Krishnas and Ramakrishna, again, not that Hare Krishna has any negative connotation. It's just they follow Krishna, and it's just a sect. That's right. In contrast to Ramakrishna, who was an Indian saint and Vivekananda's teacher. And,
yes.
And
if you're asking me to elaborate on Ramakrishna,
yeah, just
this pairing of Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. Now, of course, I have bias, but I've got a lot of people who are biased with me. Gandhi, Tolstoy, William James, the list of students and admirers and devotees of Ramakrishna Vivekananda is extraordinary. Perhaps the greatest list ever assembled of spiritual, intellectual, and political giants who looked at this, they call them the swan and the lion. The swan was Paramahamsa Ramakrishna. He was the first incarnation that we know of who not only practiced the different portions of Hinduism to their realization. think of it this way. There are different yogas and different pathways to realization, not just in India, but there's the Christian pathway to realization for the Christian mystic. There's the Jewish pathway to realization through the Jewish mysticism. Mysticism is the I love and I want to be and I want to realize the highest, whether it's usually with God. Ramakrishna was born in 1836. He knew very little. He was never educated in any formal way. His whole life was about searching for God. And he spent the first half of his life suffering in his wanting to see God. And we don't have enough time now to talk about it. But he spent the last part of his life giving the fruits of that struggle to the world. And he followed the path, the tantric path. He followed the Advaita Vedanta path of oneness. Different teachers came along and initiated him. He kept saying, yes, is that another path to God? Yes.
Wasn't he a priest at the Kali Mandir?
He was, yes. His brother was given the position. That's a long story, and we can save that to another time. Okay. But what happened was, after he was finished with all the different ways possible within Hinduism to reach the one, mastering it and realizing God as such, he took upon himself to put all that away and to study under an Islamic master to realize God through Islam, and then through a Christian master to realize God through Christ. The first person that we know of who was so delighted to be with God that he wanted to taste the different flavors. There is a statement in the Vedas, one of the great statements of the Vedas, that truth is one, the sages call it variously. It means that Buddha, Allah, Yahweh, Christ, they're all representations of the one. The different sages call them differently. Ramakrishna is the first person through experience to say every path leads to the one. Now, he instilled that into his chief disciple, Vivekananda. And their story is fantastic, because Ramakrishna died in 1886.
Now, his wife was a kind of a spiritual patriarch as well, wasn't she?
Absolutely. She was the Holy Mother. In Tantra is so misunderstood in America. Tantra is mother worship. It is not the Divine Father, the Divine Mother, and the pathways to that divinity. And he was a devotee of the Mother, Ramakrishna was. In fact, he reconciled the whole argument between the Advaita Vedantist, which is worshiping the imperishable one, the unknowable, versus, which is monism, versus worshiping a God with a face, which is dualism. I love Kali, is dualism. Well, when Ramakrishna would go into his fits of ecstasy, not fits, when he would go into his states of ecstasy, he would, people would come and sit around him until he came down. And as he came down, he would start teaching the most magnificent teachings, fresh from the source. And he would turn immediately into the child of the mother. So the dualists had a champion in Ramakrishna because he was saying, of course, dualism. And the monists had a champion in Ramakrishna because he was saying, of course, monism. He reconciled it by saying that when you're in the ecstatic experience, which happens rarely to us, yes, then oneness is the highest understanding. But since it happens rarely, we must love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. Find the face of God that you love the most and love it and worship it and yearn to emulate it. It's like the imitation of Christ. It's like find your Ishtar, or your chosen ideal, and do everything you can to live up to that ideal. So when Ramakrishna died, before he died, he grabbed Vivekananda's hand and he says, I'm giving all my powers to you. And Vivekananda, within a 10-year period, he died in 1886. In 1893, Vivekananda became a world figure by appearing at the 1893 World Parliament of Religions in Chicago.
Okay. Well, now we're going to cut away and go up to the Ramakrishna Monastery up in Tribuca Canyon, just so they could get a chance to see the monastery, which is in a remote setting, as well as the Shrine Trail. But David, thank you for being here, and we're going to have you on definitely again because you have much to talk about.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And how can we get a hold of this book, this Vivekananda book, Lessons in Classical Yoga?
If you're interested in finding out more about the book, you can visit my website at Namaste Books, N-A-M-A-S-T-E-B-O-O-K-S, namastebooks.com. Okay. We have around 30 pages within the book posted so that you can see for yourself the exquisite nature of these writings and decide for yourself if it's something for you. And we have a store there where you can buy the book if you so desire. And there's a link to reach me if you have any questions.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks for being on. And
It's
of
my
course,
pleasure.
as always, you can contact me through movingmindbody.com. And Dave, we look forward to having you back on the show.
My pleasure. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you. How did that look? So, oops, sorry. Finish, you're going to give the person a few minutes to just kind of come back from this relaxed state.
Vedic knowledge which teaches us that you are not ordinary human being, you are not limited by time, space, condition, but in your divine nature, you are the bliss of all the gods, all the joy of the universe.
And I was teaching secular teachings, personal development, personal growth.
Repudiated all connections with organized religions and ideologies and said that his only concern was to set men absolutely, unconditionally free.
Whatever he gives you, okay? And I just react to what he feeds me. Okay? I don't have to think about it. But for now, I just wanted to use it as illustrative purposes to show you how to
by ourselves, you can see that you can definitely always increase the calorie amount, whether it's 500 calories an hour, 1,000 calories. That's a moot point, but to train on a regular basis and train on everything that what we did on this video, that's where it's at. Huh?
Master function.
Oh yeah. Our main goal, our kind of like a philosophy that we have with anything that we learn in this video. Learn, first we learn a technique. Whatever the technique is, first we learn it, then we practice it, master it, functionalize it, which means make it our own. Everybody's got a different body type. So we have to make it our own, we have to bring it into ourselves. It has to become a part of us before we actually do it correctly. And then finally maintain it, which means just after we go through those 4 processes, we just, that's the practice that keeps us going. It's like learning to ride a bike. You'll remember how to do it, but it helps to practice every once in a while. So learn, practice, master, functionalize, maintain. Self-preservation, self-perfection, we can talk about that. And the tip of the iceberg, we can look at martial arts as kind of like a tree where it has many decorative branches. One branch can be the flexibility, one branch can be health, peace of mind, another branch can be meditation, one branch could be the sporting effect, blah, blah, blah. It all ties together. First, we train hardcore physically, like there's no tomorrow. That'll transfer mentally. We control our thoughts. Emotionally, we don't get so hot-headed, and we become a lot more at peace with ourselves through the breathing techniques, the video, and then finally spiritually, whatever spiritual path you're on, Buddhist, Taoist, Zen, Christian, doesn't matter. And that's it. I thank you for watching the video. May you live in peace and happiness. That's it. Just kind of kicking range, boxing range, trapping range, and then the grappling range on the ground or wrestling. Okay? Through those techniques that I taught you in the video, we use a few kicks, we use some punches, we use an elbow. Oh yeah, here's an elbow exercise we can work on. Smell. Okay. That's it. Just kind of kicking range, boxing range, trapping range, and then the grappling range on the ground or wrestling. Okay? Through those techniques that I taught you in the video, we use a few kicks, we use some punches, we use an elbow. Oh yeah, here's an elbow exercise we can work on. Smell. Okay, whatever. Okay, self-defense purposes, say I grab her here, or I grab her here. She's got, remember the targets? Groin, boom. Foot or shin, boom. Headbutt to the nose, boom. Just grabbing my head. Boom. Where you go? Yeah, perfect. That's basic self-defense. Or say if somebody's choking you like this. Just go to the groin and then boom. So, that would go knee, boom, boom. Knee, boom, boom, boom. Again. Boom, boom. Good. From the back here. Okay. Hit the groin, back. Boom. And now grab my hand, just throw me over. Good. Katie's kicks next. Okay. Next. Okay, the box, the jabs we just did, and then you could, you throw, you block, you parry this, boom, and then throw a kick. Yeah. And then end with a jabber. Boom, 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 boom. And then this is where she's going to get in her straight blast. Like, for instance, say she throws a kick at me. This is what we're going to have them do it. Okay. I block it, throws a punch, I parry, hit, ba 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 ba, boom, boom, boom. Ba 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 ba. Okay,
I think you should just have something about getting attacked at ATM or...
Yeah, always be aware of your environment, wherever you are, whether you're going to a car, you're going to an ATM, always be aware of your environment, where you are, be mindful of that environment, and how would you react, whether it's rainy outside, it's dark outside, you're wearing high heels, you're wearing a skirt, clothing, people you're with, what kind of neighborhood you are, just be aware, don't panic, take a breath, and just be aware. And that'll help a lot. Now I'm listening. Hi, I'm Dana Fresh. Welcome to Aerobic Defensive Well. Yeah.